Here's where we stand so far through the first 10 days of November. You can actually see much of the country is still experiencing a milder November. It's really just the outskirts, really those areas along the coastal regions into the East Coast has experienced some slightly below average conditions. And then going forward for the next 7 days, that milder November continues for a good part of the country. Again, it's just the outskirts along the coastal areas where the cooler anomalies will be taking shape. But for the rest of us, the milder November continues, and even up in Alaska. But the difference in Alaska, when they're usually above average this time of year, that typically means some heavier snowfall. And they've seen record snowfall for Alaska standards. In fact, Anchorage just the other day was under a snow emergency with 2 feet of snow. This was the scene off of Thompson Pass. Whiteout conditions, 65 inches of snow just in a 24-hour period, folks. The all-time record is around 78. So, yeah, just an insane amount of snow for them. And look what's coming this week with those above average temperatures. We've got plenty of heavier snow going to be back on the table for a good part of Alaska for the next 10 days. So if you're in the market for a weather station, I definitely highly recommend the weather flow from Tempest. Christmas season is coming up. Is now. This is the best gift you can give somebody. It's the best weather station on the market. I've actually owned it for the last 3 years myself. It's a cool 5-in-1 complete system. It's all solar. So once you set it up, it takes 10 minutes to install. You can forget about it because there's little to no maintenance. They have a convenient app you can download on your phone, as well as a desktop version, and be a part of the 60,000 now in the Tempest community. And I do have a discount code. So if you are interested, use the code PALWEATHER10 for 10% off and free shipping. And I'll have the link right here in the description below so you can click on it and possibly order one for yourself and subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already. Let's take a look at the tropics because we actually have something to talk about. Yes, it is hurricane season still. And down there in the Western Caribbean, we've got a convective complex that's really starting to flare up. In fact, the National Hurricane Center now gives this a 50% probability of forming into our next tropical storm. It's going to sit there and meander for likely several days, if not almost a week. So the Western Caribbean will have to watch this storm. Further north, you can see pretty much clear skies for a good part of the country. Not any rain to speak of. It's just right along the deep south where we did have that cold front, and we've got a western trough that's moving in really like, south of I-30. That's where the heavier rainfall, closer to the coast again, down in deep South Texas, say the Houston region into portions of Louisiana over the next couple of days. They're going to be seeing definitely some heavier rainfall. If you take a look at the latest ensembles on that convective complex down there in the Western Caribbean, it's pretty bullish, guys. In fact, the latest European ensembles gives us 100% probability it could actually be forming into at least a tropical depression over the next 5 to 7 days. And most of the guidance just kind of has it sitting here meandering and spinning towards Jamaica, towards the Dominican Republic. So this whole area will definitely have to be watching for this storm as it gets its act together and slowly could become our next name storm. But for today and into the next couple of days, along that boundary where that cold front lies and that trough comes in, that's the lift mechanism. We're talking about some heavier rains for today into the Brownsville area. This is deep south down towards the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and then spreading northbound into the Corpus Christi region. And then by the time you head into tomorrow, it will be over the Houston area, the Beaumont Port Arthur area, down there into Lake Charles, places like into New Orleans, spread into Mobile, back into the Florida Panhandle. So this whole area will be inundated with very heavy rain, and they definitely need the heavier rain. And yeah, look at Alaska, folks. Yeah, by the time we head to Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe, more heavy snow, like I showed you, is going to be on the table for them. So here's the overall setup for the next 3 days, folks, right? So you got, yeah, I mean, look at that donut for a good part of the country. Not any rain to speak of on this area, just further south, right? Where that boundary is right there, deep South Texas. There's where you're going to be seeing some, likely some 2, 3, maybe 4 to 6 inch rainfall totals. The further south you live towards the coast, headed into portions into the Florida Panhandle. And then out west, we'll be watching for our significant storm system that will be developing. And eventually, that's going to be our big storm that will eventually move from west to east and really start to impact most of the U.S. as we head towards this week and into early next week towards Thanksgiving. So this is going to be a long duration storm, and one we're going to have to really watch closely. So here's the overall setup. So we've got the low pressure on Wednesday. This is the 15th. Dynamic low pressure really starting to take shape, dragging into that Pacific moisture. That's going to be funneling heavier rains back into those areas, into Central California, into Southern California. That'll eventually spread into the southwest regions. Notice the zonal flow that's taking shape across the north. Again, that's a warm flow that's pretty much shuts off the energy. So not much happening across that region, and further southbound as we head to midweek, all eyes will be on the west coast for our system that will be moving ashore by then. And once it does start to move ashore, it's going to spread those 200 to 300% above average for this time of year rainfall rates within that region. So yeah, those areas into Central and Southern California, into Nevada, spreading its moisture into the Phoenix region, you know, back here and cross into West Texas. This piece of energy will be moving in. We'll have to watch this system. So you got the Western Trough with the cold front. We'll also have another low pressure center that's going to be taking shape, starting to develop down there into the Gulf of Mexico. That will start to spread over Florida and eventually start setting up shop off the southeast coast, and will likely start spreading some heavier rains across the northeast as we get deeper into the next 5 to 7 days. And we're going to go over this. So here's the setup. You got the trough that's going to be highlighted across this region into the southeast. And then you've got the ridge of high pressure for a good part of the country. Temperatures are going to be warming up big time for the middle of the country. And then we have our significant low pressure center that will be impacting the west coast. And this is the system that will be slowly moving from west to east all weekend long, going into next week, and strengthening as it does so. So here's the so we're going to break down the details for you. Here's the low pressure heading into that Saturday time frame for this for next Saturday. So we got that low pressure, 1,006 millibar low pressure. That's going to be starting to pick up some of this moisture, start spreading some of the heavier rains back into these areas that were dry all week long, into the Carolinas, into places like Ohio, into West Virginia, back into Pennsylvania, into upstate New York, across this region. Notice the 540 line. It is dipping a little bit out of Canada, starts entering these northern interior of the Great Lakes region as it tries to pull in a little bit colder air, and as this low pressure center will be continued to rake up the coast. This is almost like a nor'easter, but there's not much cold air with it, folks. This is going to be a dominant storm track. If you watch my winter outlook, we talked about a favored storm track will be right along this area that will be draped across this region in South Texas, will be spread over Florida, and then will be coming up the East Coast. So we're going to be seeing plenty of these storm tracks going forward for this winter ahead. I guarantee you that. This one's not going to have much cold air associated with it. So if you live right there along the areas along the I-94-5 corridor, yeah, you could be getting some heavier rain, some higher wind gusts. You see the millibar, 981 millibar low pressure by then, but there's not much, lift on the backside. So as we head into that Sunday, so here's the Sunday setup. That trough off the west coast will now be setting up shop across the Rockies through New Mexico, and will be start to entering portions of Kansas into the Texas Panhandle. This won't be until next Sunday timeframe. So by then, we will have a good amount of low pressure center, 996 millibar low pressure. We'll have snow coming back for the Rockies. As this low will be moving in, it will be allowed to draw some colder air on the backside. So once this low moves through, we'll have some colder air come in on the backside. This is a week away, folks, but we'll have to watch this storm system. Some of these storms could actually be on the strong to severe side as we get into that Sunday time frame. Notice the low pressure up here towards New England. It might be cold enough by then, might squeak out some snow showers into the state of Maine as it continues to lift further north. But here's the Cape setup, not that extreme, but still, we haven't really talked about any severe weather in a long time. This will be a system that we'll definitely have to watch heading into next weekend as it starts to enter the middle of the country and start to kind of deepen, by then. So by then, going into that Monday. So this is next Monday. This will be 8 days away. Again, dragging down that colder air on the backside. Snow will start to fly back into the Rockies again, back into portions of Wyoming. We'll have a low pressure center with heavier rains start spreading back into those regions into Iowa and then back into East Texas, going into the Arkansas region, back into the Louisiana region. As this low pressure will continue to lift up into Canada, and then going into that Tuesday time frame. This is the 21st, so this is Thanksgiving week. So there's a lot of people traveling, right? We got Thanksgiving coming up the following week. So they're already expecting one of the busiest travels, Thanksgivings on record. And the weather is gonna have a lot to do with that. So I mean, we got a pretty strong system that's gonna be coming in by then. That'll be highlighted over Missouri, over Illinois, back into Kentucky, back into the southeast with some higher winds and likely some strong and some severe thunderstorms by then, as the snow will be starting to crank off the Intermountain West as it comes in on the backside. And there's that red line. That's the freezing line. So we'll have some colder air to speak of, not this week, but going into next week on the backside of that low pressure center. And then as it continues to spin up, this is Wednesday. This is likely the busiest travel day, right? We'll be watching a pretty significant low pressure by then, likely highlighted over portions of Wisconsin, over Illinois, over Indiana, through Michigan, through Ohio, and spreading down and heading towards, the mid-Atlantic region, eventually start to head towards, up into the Northeast, going towards your Thanksgiving, right? So for your Thanksgiving, here's like an early snapshot. So once that low pressure moves through, this is some of the ensembles on the European for your early Thanksgiving forecast. We'll have that colder air come in on the backside. So we should start to cool off by then across the West Coast, and some of that cooler air will likely move into the center part of the country. And then if you live southeast, you live in the Ohio Valley, you live in the Northeast, you're likely going to still be above average for Thanksgiving. The GFS is a little bit more bullish. It's a little bit more progressive, meaning it's faster pulling that low pressure and the colder air coming in on the backside. And if that comes to fruition, you'll have more of these areas across the central US being colder. And then some of those areas will be spreading into portions of the Ohio Valley by then, but much of the East Coast, regardless of the scenario, will likely be under above average conditions by the time we head into your Thanksgiving. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I do like this video. Catch me next update while I protect you before and after storm.